Martha Hollis dropped to her knees in the snow, her frozen fingers still gripping her children's hands. She couldn't feel her feet anymore. Couldn't feel anything except the weight of her daughter slumped against her back and her son's small body shaking beside her. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats. A man's voice cutting through the wind. Ma'am, can you hear me?" She looked up. A stranger on horseback, and the first words out of her cracked lips weren't, "Help me." They were, "Stay away from my children." If you've ever fought to protect someone you love, subscribe now and follow this story to the end. Comment your city below. Let me see how far this tale travels. Dr. Poe. The man dismounted before Martha could say another word. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, hands up, palms open. "Name's Jacob Mercer. I own the land east of here." Martha tried to stand. Her legs buckled. She grabbed Emma tighter, felt Samuel press his face into her hip. "I said stay back." Jacob stopped. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, wearing a coat that had seen better winters. His face was weathered, lined around the eyes, but his gaze held steady on her. Not threatening, just waiting. "Your boy's lips are blue," he said quietly. "Your girl ain't standing on her own. How long you been walking?" Martha's jaw tightened. "That ain't your concern." "It is if you die on my road." "This ain't your road." "It is, actually. Runs right through my property line." He took one step closer, then stopped again when she flinched. "Ma'am, I got a warm cabin half a mile from here. Stove's lit. Food's hot. You can hate me all you want once your children ain't freezing." Samuel tugged at her sleeve. "Mama." "Hush. Mama, I can't feel my toes." Martha looked down at her son, 7 years old. His father's eyes, his father's stubborn chin. Right now those eyes were glassy with cold, and his small body trembled so hard she could feel it through her own shaking limbs. She looked back at the stranger. "If you try anything, I won't. If you touch my children, I won't. If you think I owe you something after, you don't." Jacob's voice didn't waver. "I ain't asking for nothing. I'm telling you there's shelter, and you need it. That's all." Martha stared at him for a long moment. The wind cut between them sharp as a blade. Then Emma's knees gave out. Martha caught her, barely her own arms weak from cold and hunger. The girl weighed nothing. She'd lost so much weight these past weeks, but Martha's body had nothing left to give. Jacob moved without asking. He scooped Emma up like she weighed no more than a feed sack, cradling her against his chest. Emma's eyes fluttered open, confused, scared. "It's all right," he told her. "I got you. Your mama's right here." Martha wanted to scream, wanted to rip her daughter from this stranger's arms, but she couldn't stand, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but watch as Jacob whistled sharply. A second horse emerged from behind a ridge, a mare with a saddle blanket thick enough to sleep under. "Can you ride?" he asked Martha. "I can ride." "Then take my horse. I'll walk with your girl. Your boy can sit in front of you." Martha hesitated. "Ma'am." Jacob's voice dropped lower. "I know you don't trust me. You got no reason to. But that child in my arms ain't waking up if she stays out here another hour. You want to save her, you ride." Martha pushed herself up. Her legs screamed in protest. Samuel clung to her and she lifted him. God, when did he get so heavy and somehow mounted the horse? Her frozen fingers could barely grip the reins. Jacob started walking. Emma pressed close to his chest. His coat wrapped around her now. He moved steady through the snow. Not fast, not slow, just constant. Martha followed. She didn't take her eyes off him once. The cabin sat in a hollow between two low hills, smoke rising from a stone chimney. It wasn't fancy weathered wood, a porch with a broken rail, a barn nearby that leaned slightly to one side. but light glowed from the windows, and the smell of wood smoke reached her before they even got close. Jacob pushed the door open with his shoulder still carrying Emma. "Set her by the stove," he said to no one, to himself maybe. "Get her warm first." Martha dismounted her legs, nearly giving out again. Samuel held on to her hand so tight it hurt. She stumbled up the porch steps through the door and into warmth so sudden it made her gasp. The cabin was small. One main room with a cast-iron stove radiating heat, a wooden table with 3 chairs, a narrow hallway leading somewhere darker. Everything smelled like cedar and coffee, and something cooking soup maybe, or stew. Jacob had already laid Emma on a cot near the stove. He was pulling off her frozen boots, his movements quick but careful. "There's blankets in that chest," he said without looking up. "Get your boy wrapped up." Martha didn't move. "Ma'am?" "I heard you." "Then do it. He's shaking so hard I can hear his teeth from here." Martha's face burned. She crossed to the chest, yanked it open, grabbed 2 wool blankets that smelled faintly of lavender. She wrapped Samuel up, lifted him onto a chair by the stove, and rubbed his arms through the fabric until some color returned to his cheeks. "Mama," Samuel whispered. "That man. I know. Is he going to hurt us?" Martha looked at Jacob. He had Emma's feet in his hands now, rubbing them gently, his face set in concentration. He wasn't looking at Martha. Wasn't looking at anything except her daughter's blue toes. "No," Martha said quietly. "I don't think so." She didn't know if she believed it, but she was too tired to lie. An hour passed, then 2. Emma woke up slowly, confused, scared, asking for her father before she remembered. Martha held her through the crying, rocking her the way she used to when Emma was small enough to fit in one arm. Jacob stayed on the other side of the room. He ladled stew into bowls, set them on the table, and said nothing. When the children were calm enough to eat, he pointed at the food and stepped outside. "Where's he going?" Emma asked, her voice hoarse. "I don't know." "Is he coming back?" "I don't know that either." Samuel was already eating, spooning stew into his mouth so fast he nearly choked. Martha didn't stop him. Couldn't remember the last time he'd had something hot. She took a small bite herself. The stew was simple beef, potatoes, onions, but it tasted like the best thing she'd ever eaten. Her stomach cramped at the sudden warmth, and she had to set the spoon down, breathe through the pain. Emma watched her. "Mama, what are we going to do?" Martha looked at her daughter. 11 years old, going on 30. She'd grown up too fast these past months, carrying too much understanding, too much. "I don't know yet," Martha said. "But we're alive. That's what matters. That man, I'll handle him." "You always say that." "Because I always do." Emma's jaw tightened, that stubborn look she'd inherited from her father. "Papa used to say that too." Martha felt the words like a slap. She opened her mouth to respond, but the door creaked open. Jacob stepped back in, stamping snow from his boots. He'd been out there long enough for frost to gather on his shoulders. He glanced at the table, saw the empty bowls. "More in the pot if you want it," he said. "We're fine," Martha replied. "Your boy's eyeing it like he ain't sure." Samuel looked down quickly, guilty. Jacob crossed to the stove, filled another bowl, and set it in front of Samuel without a word. The boy glanced at Martha. "Go on," she said. "Eat." Samuel didn't need to be told twice. Jacob poured himself coffee, black, no sugar, and sat in the chair farthest from the stove. He wrapped his hands around the cup and finally looked at Martha directly. "You running from something?" Martha's spine stiffened. "That ain't your business." "It is if trouble followed you here." "It didn't." "You sure about that?" Martha stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "I don't owe you answers. You gave us food and warmth and I'm grateful. But I ain't explaining myself to a stranger." Jacob didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. "Fair enough," he said. "But you're gonna have to explain something because you and your children didn't end up half dead in a snowstorm by accident." How would you know what happened to us? Because I've seen that look before. He set his coffee down. In the mirror, every day for 8 years. Martha stared at him. Jacob's voice dropped lower. You lost someone. Someone you thought you'd grow old with. And whatever happened after that, whatever's chasing you, or whoever you're running from, it ain't just about you anymore. It's about them. He nodded toward the children. And you ain't sure how to keep them safe. Martha's throat tightened. She wanted to scream at him, how dare he presume, how dare he speak like he knew anything about her life, her pain, her choices. But she couldn't, because every word was true. My husband died 18 months ago, she heard herself say. Mine accident in Colorado. Tunnel collapse. They didn't find his body for 3 days. Jacob said nothing. He left debts. I didn't know how bad until after the funeral. Men came to the house, representatives from the mining company. Said we owed more than the land was worth. Said they'd take the children as laborers if I couldn't pay. Emma made a small sound. Martha had never told her this part. So I ran. Sold what I could, packed what I couldn't, and ran. Took a stagecoach west until the money ran out, then walked. How long you been walking? 4 days. Jacob let out a slow breath. 4 days. In this weather. With children. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when your choices are watch your children get taken or freeze trying to save them. Martha's voice cracked. She hated the sound of it. I chose freezing. I chose dying out there if it meant they didn't end up in some company work camp. For a long moment, only the crackle of the fire filled the silence. Then Jacob spoke. You can stay here. Martha blinked. What? You heard me. You and your children. You can stay. Why? Because I got room. Because winter's gonna get worse before it gets better. Because... He stopped, looked at his hands. Because I was in your place once. Not exactly, but close enough. And someone helped me when I didn't deserve it. I don't want charity. Good. Because I ain't offering it. Jacob met her eyes. I'm offering work. I got a ranch to run, more land than one man can handle, and no help worth a damn. You want to earn your keep, you can. You want to leave when the snow melts, you can do that too. But I ain't gonna watch 3 people die when I got the means to stop it. Martha's chest hurt. Not from cold, from something else. Something she couldn't name. What about the mining company? She asked. If they find us here, then they find you here. And they deal with me. You don't know these men. No, but they don't know me either. Jacob's voice hardened. And I ain't in the habit of letting someone take what ain't theirs. Martha looked at her children. Emma was staring at Jacob with something like hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. Samuel had stopped eating, watching his mother, waiting for her decision. She thought about the road behind them. The cold. The hunger. The nights huddled together under a thin blanket, praying the sun would rise before their bodies gave out. She thought about the road ahead. More of the same. Maybe worse. She thought about this stranger who'd pulled her daughter from the snow, fed her son without being asked, and offered shelter without demanding payment. One condition, Martha said. Jacob waited. The door doesn't lock. I leave when I want. No questions. That's 2 conditions. Take it or leave it. The faintest smile crossed his face. Reckon I can live with that. That night, Martha put the children to bed in a room Jacob said had belonged to his sister. The quilts were clean, the mattress soft, and both Emma and Samuel were asleep within minutes. Martha stood at the doorway watching them breathe, safe, warm, fed. She didn't cry. She'd forgotten how. But something inside her cracked open just a little. Just enough to let in a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in months. Hope. She closed the door softly and walked back to the main room. Jacob sat by the fire staring at the flames. He didn't look up when she entered. "I'll sleep in the barn," he said. "You take the other room." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He stood, grabbed his coat from the hook. "But I'm doing it anyway. There's coffee on the stove and bread in the box if you want it." Martha watched him move toward the door, her hands clasped in front of her tight enough to hurt. "Jacob." He stopped. "Why are you doing this? Really?" He stood there for a long moment, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "Because 8 years ago, I buried my wife and the baby she died trying to give me. Dug the graves myself, covered them with my own hands." He turned slightly, just enough for her to see his profile. "And when I was done, I sat in this cabin with a loaded rifle in my lap, thinking about how easy it would be to end it all." Martha's breath caught. "Someone stopped me. A preacher passing through. Don't even remember his name. He sat with me for 3 days until the worst of it passed. Didn't preach, didn't pray out loud, just sat." Jacob's jaw tightened. Before he left, he said something I ain't ever forgotten. "What?" He said, "The dead ain't to me. It's to whoever you meet next who needs what I gave you." Jacob pulled open the door. Cold air rushed in. "So that's why, Mrs. Hollis, I ain't being kind. I'm paying what I owe." He stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind him. Martha stood alone in the firelight, her hand pressed to her chest, feeling something stir that she'd thought was dead forever. Morning came gray and cold. Martha woke before dawn, her body stiff from actual rest, something she hadn't had in weeks. She dressed quickly, checked on the children, and stepped outside. The snow had stopped falling, but everything was blanketed in white. The barn sat 50 yards away, smoke rising from a small chimney she hadn't noticed before. Jacob was already out there, she realized. Already working. She found him splitting wood, his breath clouding in the frozen air. He moved with the kind of rhythm that came from years of practice, lift, swing, crack. The pile beside him was already chest high. "You're up early," he said without turning. "So are you. Ranch don't run itself." Martha watched him work for a moment. Then she said, "What do you need done?" Now he turned. His expression was unreadable. "You don't have to start today. You barely slept." "I slept better than I have in months. What do you need done?" Jacob studied her. Whatever he saw made him nod once slowly. "Chickens need feeding. Eggs need collecting. There's a root cellar behind the barn. Potatoes and carrots need sorting. Some have gone soft." "I can do that." "I know you can." Martha turned toward the barn, then stopped. "My son Samuel. He's gonna want to help. He ain't strong, but he works hard. He can help me with the horses. Gentle work. Good for a boy his age. And my daughter. What's she good at?" Martha thought about it. "Reading, writing. She's smart, smarter than me probably. Then she can help with the ledgers. I ain't good with numbers and the books are a mess." He paused. "If she's willing. I'll ask her." "Good." Martha nodded and walked toward the barn. She was halfway there when Jacob's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Hollis." She looked back. "Welcome to Mercer Ranch." She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing, just nodded and kept walking. But somewhere deep inside that crack of hope widened just a little more. 3 days passed. Martha fell into a rhythm she hadn't known she needed. Rise before dawn, feed the chickens, collect the eggs, sort vegetables, cook meals, mend clothes that had been torn on the road, wash linens, fall into bed exhausted, and wake up ready to do it again. Samuel followed Jacob everywhere like a shadow. The boy had never known his father well. Thomas Hollis had worked the mines 6 days a week, leaving before dawn and returning after dark. But he'd craved a man's attention, and now he'd found it. Martha watched them from the kitchen window, Jacob showing Samuel how to brush down a horse. Samuel's face lit up with pride when the mare nudged his shoulder. It should have made her angry, or scared, or defensive. Instead, she felt grateful. Emma was slower to warm up. She helped with the ledgers as promised, her neat handwriting fixing years of Jacob's scrawled chaos. But she didn't smile, didn't laugh. Just worked with her jaw set and her eyes hard. One evening, Martha found her daughter standing at the window staring out at nothing. "Emma, I'm fine. I didn't ask if you were fine." Emma's shoulders tensed. "Then don't ask anything." Martha crossed the room and stood beside her daughter. "You're angry." "No." "Emma, I said I'm fine. And I said I didn't ask." Martha's voice softened. "Talk to me." Emma's jaw worked. For a long moment, Martha thought she'd stay silent. Then the words came out in a rush. "You're letting him replace Papa." Martha felt the words like a blow. "What? Samuel follows him around like Papa never existed. You smile at him when you think no one's watching. We've been here 3 days and already you're—" "I'm what? Forgetting." Emma's voice cracked. "You're forgetting Papa." Martha reached for her daughter, but Emma pulled away. "I'm not," Martha said. "I will never forget your father." "Then why are we here? Why are we living in some stranger's house, eating his food, sleeping in his beds?" "Because we were dying, Emma. Because I couldn't keep you safe on my own." "Papa would have—" "Papa isn't here." Martha's voice came out sharper than she intended. She saw Emma flinch and forced herself to breathe. "Your father loved us. I know that. You know that. But he's gone, and I had to choose between holding on to his memory and keeping you alive. I chose you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I miss him." "I know, baby. I miss him too. I don't want to forget him." "You won't. I won't let you." Martha reached out again, and this time Emma let herself be held. "But staying alive doesn't mean forgetting. It just means surviving long enough to remember him properly." Emma cried, then really cried the way she hadn't since the funeral. Martha held her daughter and let her own tears fall silent, hidden in Emma's hair. They stood there for a long time. Later that night, Martha stepped onto the porch. Jacob was there, sitting in a wooden chair, whittling something small from a piece of oak. He didn't look up. "She all right?" he asked. "She will be. She don't like me much. She doesn't know you." "Fair point." He kept whittling. "She loved her father." "Yes. And she's scared you're going to replace him with someone else." Martha sat in the chair beside him. "You heard." "Didn't mean to. Sound carries." "I know." They sat in silence for a while. The night was cold, but clear stars spread across the sky like scattered flour. "I ain't trying to replace anyone," Jacob said finally. "For her or for you. I know. I had a wife once, Sarah. She's been gone 8 years and I still talk to her sometimes, when no one's around." He paused. "I ain't looking for someone to fill her place. There ain't no filling it." Martha looked at him. In the moonlight, his face seemed softer, less guarded. "Then what are you looking for?" she asked. Jacob stopped whittling. He stared at the piece of wood in his hands like it held answers he couldn't quite read. "I don't know," he said. "Quiet maybe. Purpose. Something to wake up for besides chores and duty. And us. You gave me something to protect. First time in years I felt like anything I did mattered." He met her eyes. "That ain't replacement. That's living again." Martha didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. They sat together in the cold, watching the stars, until the silence felt less like a wall and more like a bridge. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Martha was in the root cellar when she heard hoofbeats. Not one horse, several, coming fast. She dropped the potatoes and ran outside. 3 men on horseback had stopped in front of the cabin. The one in the middle wore a coat too fine for the territory leather gloves, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Jacob stood on the porch, his hand resting near his hip, where his revolver sat. "Can I help you?" Jacob's voice was flat. The man in the fine coat tipped his hat. "Morning. Name's Hector Dunn. I'm looking for a woman named Martha Hollis. Heard she might have passed through this way." Martha's blood turned to ice. She pressed herself against the barn wall out of sight, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Jacob didn't move. "Don't know anyone by that name." "That's so." Dunn's smile widened. "Funny. Stagecoach driver 2 towns over said he dropped a woman with 2 children near this road, about 4 days ago." "Lot of women travel these roads." Not many fit her description. Blonde hair, green eyes, thin. 2 children, a girl and a boy. Dunn leaned forward in his saddle. "You sure you ain't seen her?" Jacob stepped down from the porch, slow, deliberate. "Mister, I don't know what business you got with this woman, but I'll tell you what I told the last stranger who came through asking questions." He stopped 10 feet from Dunn's horse. "This is my land, my property, and I don't take kindly to people who can't take a hint." One of Dunn's men reached for his gun. Jacob's hand moved faster than Martha would have believed, and suddenly his revolver was out-cocked and aimed at Dunn's chest. "Tell your man to keep his hand where I can see it." Dunn raised one gloved hand. His man froze. "Well now." Dunn said, his voice still pleasant. "That's quite a reaction for someone who don't know the woman I'm looking for. I ain't a man who likes threats on his property. Don't need to know anyone to know that." Dunn studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled again, that cold, empty smile. "All right, Mr. Mercer. Jacob Mercer." "Mr. Mercer, I'll respect your property. For now." Dunn gathered his reins. "But I'll be back. The woman I'm looking for owes a significant debt to Hargrove Mining Company. Legal debt, documented, and we always collect what we're owed. Then you best bring better paperwork next time, and better manners." Dunn chuckled. "I like you, Mr. Mercer. You got spine. Most men don't." He tipped his hat again. "We'll meet again." He turned his horse and rode off. His men followed. Jacob stood in the yard until they disappeared over the ridge. Then he holstered his weapon and walked straight to the barn. Martha was shaking when he found her. "Get inside," he said. "We need to talk." "They'll come back." Martha paced the cabin, her arms wrapped tight around herself. "They always come back." "I know. They'll bring more men. Maybe the law." "Maybe?" "Jacob, you don't understand. The mining company, they own half the judges in 3 territories. They'll get papers, legal papers saying I owe them money, and then they ain't taking anything." Martha stopped pacing. "You can't fight this. Not alone." "Who says I'm alone?" "What?" Jacob stood by the fire, his hands behind his back. "I got neighbors, ranchers, farmers, men who've dealt with mining companies before. They don't take kindly to outsiders pushing folks around. You'd ask them to fight for me, a stranger. I'd ask them to stand up for what's right, which is what they do anyway." Jacob met her eyes. "You ain't alone anymore, Martha. That's what you keep forgetting." Martha's throat tightened. "I don't know how to. I've been alone so long." "No, you haven't. You had your children. You had yourself." He stepped closer. "Now you got more than that, if you want it." She looked at him. This man she'd known less than a week. This stranger who'd pulled her from the snow, fed her children, stood between her and the men who'd haunted her nightmares for months. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you care so much?" Jacob didn't answer right away. He looked at the fire, then at her, then at the window where the gray morning light was just starting to brighten. "Because you remind me of her," he said finally. "Sarah. Not the way you don't look anything alike, but the way you fight, the way you refuse to break even when everything's trying to break you." He swallowed. "I couldn't save her. I couldn't save our baby. But maybe I can help save you." Martha felt the tears coming and didn't fight them. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know." "What if they win?" "They won't." "How do you know?" Jacob stepped forward and took her hand. His grip was rough, warm, steady. "Because you've got something they ain't never gonna have. Something that can't be bought or threatened or taken." He squeezed her hand. "You've got people who'll stand with you, no matter what comes." Martha looked at their hands, his weathered and scarred, hers, trembling but still holding on. And for the first time in 18 months, she believed him. The days after Hector Dunn's visit stretched tight as wire. Martha found herself watching the road more than she wanted to admit. Every time hoofbeats echoed in the distance, her hands would still over whatever task she was doing, kneading bread, mending shirts, sorting eggs, and she'd hold her breath until the sound passed. Jacob noticed. He didn't say anything, but she caught him checking the horizon too. His jaw set in that hard line she was learning meant trouble lived in his thoughts. A week passed, then two. The snow kept falling, piling higher against the cabin walls, trapping them in a world that felt both safe and suffocating. Martha told herself that was good if she couldn't leave, neither could Dunn's men. The roads would be impassable for weeks. They had time, but time for what she didn't know. On the 15th morning, Jacob came in from the barn stamping snow from his boots and announced they were going to town. Martha looked up from the stove. "Town. Supply run. We're low on flour, salt, coffee. Need to pick up some things before the next storm hits. I can make a list. You don't need me to. I want you to come." Jacob pulled off his gloves and set them by the fire. "All of you. The children, too." Martha's stomach tightened. Jacob, if Dunn has men watching, then they see a family going about their business. Nothing suspicious about that. "We ain't a family." The words came out sharper than she intended. Jacob's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Hurt maybe, or just resignation. "You know what I mean," she said softer. "I do." He poured himself coffee. "But the town don't. And right now, what the town thinks matters more than what's true." Martha wiped her hands on her apron. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying Hector Dunn's gonna come back with papers. Legal papers. And when he does, he's gonna try to turn folks against you. Make you look like a criminal, a debtor, someone who don't deserve help." Jacob met her eyes. "Best way to fight that is to make sure folks know you before he poisons them against you." Martha thought about it. She hated the idea parading herself and her children through a town full of strangers begging for acceptance she didn't feel she deserved. But Jacob was right. She'd seen it before in Colorado. The mining company hadn't just come for her land. They'd come for her reputation first, spread rumors, turned neighbors into enemies. By the time they showed up with their papers, no one would lift a finger to help her. "All right," she said. "We'll go." Jacob nodded. "Wagon leaves in an hour." The ride into town took most of the morning. The roads were rough, half buried in snow, and the wagon creaked and groaned with every rut. Samuel sat up front with Jacob, peppering him with questions about the horses, the land, the town they were approaching. Emma sat in the back with Martha silent, her face turned away. Martha reached over and took her daughter's hand. Emma didn't pull away, but she didn't squeeze back either. The town of Miller's Crossing wasn't much a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church with a crooked steeple, and a handful of smaller buildings scattered like afterthoughts. Smoke rose from chimneys, and a few figures moved along the wooden walkways bundled against the cold. Jacob pulled the wagon up in front of the general store and climbed down. He helped Martha off, then lifted Samuel to the ground. Emma jumped down on her own before anyone could offer. "Stay close," Jacob said quietly. "Let me do the talking at first." Martha nodded. The bell above the door jangled as they stepped inside. The store smelled of tobacco leather and something sweet, molasses maybe, or dried apples. Shelves lined the walls packed with goods. A potbelly stove glowed in the corner, and beside it sat an older woman in a gray dress, her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked up when they entered. Her eyes swept over Jacob, then Martha, then the children. Her expression didn't change, but Martha felt the weight of that gaze, like a physical thing. "Jacob Mercer," the woman said. "Ain't seen you in near a month." "Been busy, Mrs. Pruitt." "I can see that." The woman's eyes settled on Martha. "You gonna introduce your guests?" Jacob stepped aside. "This is Martha Hollis and her children Emma and Samuel. They're staying at the ranch." Mrs. Pruitt's eyebrow rose just slightly, but enough. "Staying?" "Yes, ma'am." "For how long?" "Long as they need." The silence stretched. Martha felt her face flush, felt the judgment in that quiet moment. She knew what the woman was thinking. A widow, living with a man she wasn't married to, children involved. She lifted her chin. "Miss Pruitt," Martha said, her voice steady, "I'm grateful for any supplies you can spare. I understand if our situation seems unusual." "Unusual." Mrs. Pruitt stood slowly, her joints creaking. "That's one word for it. What word would you use?" The question came out before Martha could stop it. She heard Emma's sharp intake of breath, felt Jacob stiffen beside her, but Mrs. Pruitt didn't seem offended. If anything, something like respect flickered across her weathered face. "I'd use the word practical," the older woman said. "Winter's hard enough without judgment making it harder." She moved behind the counter, pulled out a ledger. "What do you need?" Martha blinked. Flour, salt, coffee, some fabric if you have it. The children need warmer clothes." "I have it." Mrs. Pruitt began pulling items from the shelves. "You sew?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Most women out here can't be bothered to learn anymore." She set a bolt of wool on the counter. "This'll keep little ones warm. Ain't pretty, but it works." "Thank you." Mrs. Pruitt paused, her hand resting on the fabric. She looked at Martha, really looked the way no one had since Thomas died. "You've got hard eyes," she said quietly. "The kind that come from seeing too much, too young." Martha didn't know what to say. "My husband had eyes like that. After the war." Mrs. Pruitt returned to gathering supplies. "He never did shake whatever he saw, carried it with him till the day he died." She glanced up. "But he kept going. That's what matters. The keeping going." Martha swallowed around the lump in her throat. "Yes, ma'am." They loaded the supplies in silence. As they were leaving, Mrs. Pruitt called out, "Mrs. Hollis." Martha turned. "Church is Sundays at 10. Wouldn't hurt you to show your face." It wasn't quite an invitation, but it wasn't a rejection either. "I'll consider it," Martha said. Mrs. Pruitt nodded once. "You do that." Outside, the cold hit Martha like a slap. She climbed into the wagon, her mind churning. Jacob said nothing as he guided the horses back toward the road. It was Samuel who broke the silence. "That lady was scary," he said. Jacob chuckled, a low, rough sound Martha hadn't heard before. "Mrs. Pruitt, she's all right. Just takes a while to warm up." "Like you?" Samuel asked. Jacob glanced at the boy. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Mama said you were cold at first too, but you're not cold anymore." Martha's face burned. She shot Samuel a look, but he was already turned away, watching the passing landscape with innocent curiosity. Jacob didn't respond, but Martha caught the ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. Emma, as usual, said nothing at all. That night, after the children were asleep, Martha found Jacob on the porch. He sat in his usual chair, a cup of coffee in his hands, staring out at nothing. She sat beside him without asking. "Mrs. Pruitt," she said after a while. "She knows." "Knows what?" "That I'm running from something, that this arrangement ain't normal." "Probably." Jacob took a sip of his coffee. "Agnes Pruitt's been in this town longer than anyone. She knows everything about everyone, and she keeps most of it to herself." "You think she'll talk?" "No, but others will." He set the cup down. By tomorrow, half the town will know Jacob Mercer's got a woman living with him. By next week, they'll have invented a dozen stories about why. Martha's hands tightened in her lap. Maybe I should go. Before what? Before folks talk. Jacob turned to face her. Martha, folks are gonna talk no matter what you do. That's what folks do. The question ain't whether they talk. It's whether you give them something true to talk about or let them make up lies. What's the true thing? That you needed help and I gave it. That your children were freezing and I offered shelter. That you're working my ranch and earning your keep. He paused. That's the truth. Simple as that. Nothing's ever that simple. It is, if you make it so. Martha looked at him. In the moonlight, his face was all shadows and hard lines. But his eyes were steady, calm. You really believe that? She said. I do. Even knowing what might come, Dunn and his men, the mining company. Even knowing that. Jacob stood, stretched his back. Fear ain't ever stopped me from doing what's right. It ain't gonna start now. He went inside, leaving Martha alone with the stars and the cold and the strange, terrifying warmth spreading through her chest. The weeks that followed were the hardest Martha had worked in years. Jacob hadn't been exaggerating about the ranch needing help. Fences needed mending, animals needed tending, the cabin needed repairs that had been put off too long. Martha threw herself into every task, partly because the work needed doing, and partly because staying busy kept her from thinking. Thinking was dangerous. Thinking meant remembering Thomas, remembering the men who came to take everything, remembering the long walk through the snow with 2 children and nothing else. Thinking meant noticing the way Jacob looked at her sometimes when he thought she wasn't watching. The way his hand would linger near hers when passing tools. The way his voice softened when he spoke to her children. She couldn't afford to notice those things. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she noticed anyway. Samuel bloomed under Jacob's attention. The boy who'd barely spoken for months now chattered constantly, asking questions about horses and cattle and everything in between. He followed Jacob like a duckling, mimicking his walk, copying his mannerisms. It would have been funny if it didn't make Martha's chest ache. He needs a father, she thought. He needs someone to show him how to be a man. Thomas had tried, but Thomas had been gone more than he was home, and when he was home, he was too tired to do more than ruffle Samuel's hair and collapse into bed. Jacob was different. Jacob made time. Jacob taught and explained and corrected with patience Martha hadn't known men were capable of. Emma remained distant. She did her work, the ledgers, the mending, the cooking, when Martha asked, but she did it with her jaw set and her eyes hard. She didn't speak to Jacob unless spoken to. She didn't smile at his jokes. She barely acknowledged his existence. Martha tried talking to her. Once, twice, a dozen times. Each conversation ended the same way, with Emma insisting she was fine, and Martha knowing she wasn't. One afternoon, Martha found her daughter standing at the fence, staring at the horses in the pasture. You used to love horses, Martha said, coming up beside her. I still do. Then why don't you go closer? Jacob would let you ride if you asked. Emma's jaw tightened. I don't want to ask him for anything. Emma, he's not Papa. The words burst out raw and angry. He's never going to be Papa, and I don't care how nice he is or how much Samuel likes him or how you look at him when... She stopped, breathing hard. Martha waited. You look at him, Emma whispered, the way you used to look at Papa. And it makes me sick. The words hit like stones. Martha reached for her daughter, but Emma pulled away. I'm not replacing your father, Martha said carefully. I would never. You already are. Every day we stay here, every day you let him take care of us, you're replacing him. Emma's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. And the worst part is, I can't even blame you. Because Papa left us with nothing. He left us with debts and danger, and nothing to remember him by, except a grave we can't even visit. Emma, your father loved us. Then why didn't he protect us? The question came out broken, desperate. Why didn't he make sure we'd be safe? Why did he leave us alone? Martha had no answer. She'd asked herself the same questions 100 times in the dark, and she still didn't know. I'm sorry, she said finally. I'm sorry he's gone. I'm sorry I can't fix it. I'm sorry this isn't the life I wanted for you. Emma wiped her eyes roughly. I know. But I need you to understand something. Martha stepped closer, forced her daughter to meet her gaze. I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Whatever it takes. If that means staying here, I'll stay. If that means accepting help from a man who hasn't asked for anything in return, I'll accept it. And if that means you hate me for a while, I'll bear that too. Emma's lip trembled. I don't hate you, she whispered. I know, baby. I just miss him. I miss him so much it feels like dying. Martha pulled her daughter into her arms. Emma resisted for a moment, then collapsed against her, sobbing the way she hadn't let herself sob since they left Colorado. They stood there for a long time, two broken people holding each other together. When they finally pulled apart, Emma's face was red and swollen, but something in her eyes had shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. I'll try, Emma said quietly, to be nicer, to him. That's all I'm asking. That evening, Emma asked Jacob to pass the bread at dinner. It was a small thing, a tiny thing, but Jacob looked at Martha across the table, and something passed between them that felt like hope. The thaw came slowly, both outside and within. Snow began to melt first in patches, then in streams. The creek behind the cabin unfroze and started its quiet whisper again. Animals emerged from wherever they'd been hiding, and the air lost some of its bitter edge. Martha found herself standing at the kitchen window one morning, watching Jacob and Samuel work in the yard. The boy was struggling with a fence post, his small arms straining against the weight. Jacob stood behind him, not helping, just waiting. You can do it, she heard him say. Just shift your grip. There you go. Samuel's face lit up when the post finally sank into the ground. He looked up at Jacob like the man had hung the moon. Martha's heart clenched. She turned away from the window and found Emma watching her. He's good with Sam, Emma said quietly. He is. Papa never... he tried, but he was always so tired. Your father worked hard. I know. Emma was silent for a moment. Do you think Papa would mind that we're here? Martha considered the question, thought about Thomas, his gentle smile, his constant worry, his dreams that never quite came true. I think your father would want us to be safe, she said finally. I think he'd be grateful someone was taking care of us. Emma nodded slowly, then hesitantly. Do you like him, Jacob, The question caught Martha off guard. She opened her mouth closed, it tried again. I respect him, she said carefully. He's a good man. That's not what I asked. Martha looked at her daughter. This girl who was growing up too fast, seeing too much understanding more than any 11-year-old should. I don't know, Martha admitted. And even if I did, it wouldn't matter. We're here because we need shelter, not because of anything else. Emma studied her for a long moment. Then she shrugged. Okay, she said. If you say so. She went back to her mending, leaving Martha alone with questions she wasn't ready to answer. Sunday came, and with it, Martha's decision to attend church. She dressed the children in their cleanest clothes, smoothed her own hair back, and tried to ignore the flutter of nerves in her stomach. Jacob had offered to stay behind. Don't want to make things complicated, he'd said, but Martha had shaken her head. If we're going to face the town, we face it together, all of us. So they rode into Miller's Crossing as a group, the wagon creaking under their weight, the morning sun warming their faces. The church sat at the end of the main street, its white walls faded its steeple, leaning slightly to one side. People were already gathering outside. They turned as the wagon approached, their conversations, dyeing their eyes, tracking every movement. Martha kept her head high. Jacob helped her down, then the children. They walked toward the church together, and Martha felt every gaze like a brand on her skin. Mrs. Pruitt stood near the door. She nodded once as they passed. Mrs. Hollis, Mr. Mercer. Mrs. Pruitt, Martha replied. They took a seat near the back. The pew creaked under their weight. Samuel fidgeted. Emma sat rigid and still. The service passed in a blur. Martha heard the words, but didn't process them. She was too aware of the whispers behind her, the sidelong glances, the judgment she could feel even if she couldn't see it. When it was over, she stood to leave, but a woman blocked her path. Middle-aged, sharp-featured, dressed in black, like she was still mourning something. Her eyes swept over Martha with undisguised contempt. "You're the one living at Mercer's place," the woman said. Not a question. "I am. Unmarried, with children." The woman's lip curled. "What kind of example do you think you're setting?" Martha felt her temper rise. She pushed it down. "The kind where I keep my children fed and sheltered through winter, ma'am." By attaching yourself to a man like some kind of... Careful. Jacob's voice came from behind Martha, low and dangerous. He stepped forward, placing himself between her and the woman. "Whatever you're about to say, I'd think hard before saying it." The woman's face reddened. "Jacob Mercer, I've known you since you were a boy. Your mother would be ashamed." "My mother's dead, same as my father, same as my wife." Jacob's voice didn't rise, but something in it made the woman step back. "And I reckon if any of them were here, they'd tell you to mind your own business and let people live their lives." Silence fell over the churchyard. Everyone was watching now. The woman sputtered. "I never—" "Yes, you did." Mrs. Pruitt's voice cut through the tension. She stepped forward, her cane clicking against the wooden walkway. "You did, Edna. Same as you always do." She turned to Martha. "Don't mind her. Some folks got nothing better to do than judge others for surviving." The woman Edna opened her mouth to respond, but Mrs. Pruitt silenced her with a look. "Go home, Edna. Your husband's waiting." Edna shot one last venomous glance at Martha, then turned and stalked away. The crowd slowly dispersed, conversations resuming in hushed tones. Mrs. Pruitt turned to Martha. "You handled that well," she said. "I wanted to hit her." "I know. That's why I said you handled it well." The older woman's eyes softened, just slightly. "Come by the store tomorrow. I've got some fabric set aside. On the house." Martha blinked. "I can't accept." "You can, and you will. Call it a welcome gift." Mrs. Pruitt glanced at Jacob. "You're lucky, Mercer. This one's got spine." She walked away before either of them could respond. The ride home was quiet. Samuel fell asleep against Emma's shoulder. Emma stared out at the passing landscape, lost in thought. Martha sat beside Jacob, her hands folded in her lap. "Thank you," she said finally, "for what you said back there." "Didn't say anything that wasn't true." "Still, you didn't have to." Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then, "I told you before, you ain't alone anymore." Martha looked at him. His profile was sharp against the gray sky. His jaw set in that stubborn line she was learning meant he'd made up his mind about something. "Why does that scare me?" she whispered. "Because you're smart." He glanced at her just briefly. "Being alone is safe. Nobody can hurt you if you don't let them close." "Is that what you did after Sarah?" "For 8 years." He turned back to the road. "Didn't make me happy. Just made me alone." Martha didn't respond. There was nothing to say. But when the wagon hit a rut and she swayed toward him, she didn't pull away as quickly as she should have. And neither did he. 2 days later, the letter came. A rider from town brought it, a young man with nervous eyes who handed it to Jacob and rode off without waiting for a response. The envelope was thick, official-looking, stamped with a seal Martha recognized all too well. Hargrove Mining Company. Jacob opened it, while Martha watched, her heart pounding. His face went still as he read, then harder. Then something like cold fury settled into his features. "What does it say?" Martha asked. Jacob handed her the letter. She read it twice, the words blurring through sudden tears. "They're claiming I stole from them," she whispered. "That I took company property when I fled. They're demanding— Jacob, they're demanding I return the children as collateral until the debt is paid. That ain't gonna happen. They've got a judge's signature. I don't care if they've got the president's signature." Jacob took the letter back, folded it carefully. "They ain't taking your children. They ain't taking you. And they ain't setting foot on this property again. You can't fight the law. This ain't law. This is theft dressed up in fancy paper." He met her eyes. "And I've dealt with thieves before." Martha's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table. "What are we going to do?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm, steady, certain. "Tomorrow I ride out to see some folks, neighbors, friends, people who owe me favors and people who don't but who hate the mining companies more than they hate owing anyone anything." He placed his hand over hers. "When Dunn comes back, and he will come back, he's gonna find more than just a rancher and a widow waiting for him." Martha stared at their hands. His rough, weathered, scarred, hers still trembling despite his warmth. "You'd really do that?" she asked. "Risk everything for us?" Jacob's grip tightened. "Martha, I spent 8 years with nothing to fight for, nothing to protect, nothing to lose." He lifted her chin, forced her to meet his gaze. "You gave me something worth keeping, and I don't give up easy." She should have pulled away. Should have reminded herself that this was temporary, that she couldn't afford to feel what she was feeling, that people who got too close always ended up leaving. Instead, she turned her hand over and laced her fingers through his. "Neither do I," she said. Jacob left before dawn the next morning. Martha stood on the porch watching him saddle his horse. Her arms wrapped tight against the cold. He moved with quiet efficiency, checking straps, adjusting the rifle in its holster, loading saddlebags with enough supplies for several days. "How long?" she asked. 3 days, maybe 4. He cinched the final strap and turned to face her. "The Hendersons are a full day's ride. The Crawfords are past them, and I need to stop by Miller's Crossing, talk to some folks there. And if Dunn comes while you're gone—" Jacob pulled something from his coat, a revolver smaller than his, worn but clean. He held it out to her. "You know how to use this." Martha took it. The weight was familiar. Thomas had taught her to shoot years ago before everything fell apart. "I know." "Good. Keep it close. Keep the children inside. And if anyone comes up that road who ain't me—" He paused. "You do what you have to do." She tucked the gun into her apron pocket. "Jacob." He waited. "Come back." Something shifted in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the gray threaded through his beard, the lines around his eyes, the way his jaw tightened like he was holding back words he wasn't ready to say. "I will," he said. "That's a promise." Then he mounted his horse and rode off into the gray morning light, and Martha stood there until he disappeared over the ridge, her hand pressed against the cold weight of the gun in her pocket. The first day passed slowly. Martha kept the children close, finding tasks to occupy their hands and their minds. Emma worked on the ledgers, her pen scratching steadily across the pages. Samuel helped Martha sort dried beans, his small fingers picking out the bad ones with careful concentration. "Where did Mr. Jacob go?" Samuel asked for the 3rd time. "To visit friends." "When's he coming back?" "Soon." "How soon?" Martha set down her handful of beans. "Samuel, I need you to listen to me. Mr. Jacob went to get help. While he's gone, we need to be careful. Stay inside. Don't go near the road. And if anyone comes—" "I know." Samuel's face had gone serious. too serious for a 7-year-old. Hide and be quiet. Martha's chest ached. No child should know those words so well. That's right, she said softly. You're a brave boy. Papa said that too, before he went to the mine the last time. Martha pulled him close, pressed her lips to his hair. Your papa was right. That night she didn't sleep. She sat in the chair by the window, the gun in her lap, watching the road. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound, the creak of the cabin, the whisper of wind, the distant howl of coyotes made her heart pound. Emma found her there at dawn, still awake, still watching. Mama, you need to rest. I will, later. You said that yesterday. Martha looked at her daughter. Emma stood in the doorway. Her nightgown wrinkled, her hair tangled from sleep, but her eyes were clear, steady. I can watch, Emma said. For a few hours. You taught me to shoot. Remember. Martha remembered. Last summer before Thomas died, when they still had a farm and a future and something like hope. She'd taught Emma to handle a rifle, to aim, to breathe before squeezing the trigger. Thomas had disapproved. Girls don't need to know such things, he'd said, but Martha had insisted. Just in case, she'd told him. Just in case. Now she was grateful for her own stubbornness. 2 hours, Martha said, handing Emma the gun. If you see anything at all, you wake me. I will. Martha lay down on the cot near the stove, her body screaming for rest. Sleep came faster than she expected, pulling her down into darkness before she could fight it. She dreamed of Thomas. Not as he'd been at the end, tired, worried, broken by work that never paid enough, but as he'd been when they met. Young, smiling, full of plans that seemed possible back then. You'll be all right, he told her in the dream. You're stronger than you know. I don't feel strong. You never did. That's what makes you strong. She woke to Emma's hand on her shoulder. Someone's coming. Martha was on her feet before the words fully registered. She grabbed the gun from Emma, crossed to the window, peered through the frosted glass. A single rider, coming slow, too far away to see clearly. Take Samuel to the back room, Martha said. Close the door. Don't come out until I tell you. But now Emma. Emma grabbed her brother's hand and pulled him toward the hallway. Martha heard the door close, heard the scrape of furniture being moved, Emma barricading them in smart girl, and turned back to the window. The rider was closer now. Close enough to make it out details. Not done. Not one of his men. A woman. Older, heavyset, wrapped in a thick coat, riding a mule that looked as tired as she did. Martha's finger eased off the trigger. She stepped onto the porch, gun still ready, and waited. The woman pulled up her mule and squinted at Martha. You the one staying at Mercer's place? Who's asking? Name's Ruth Henderson. My husband got a visit from Jacob yesterday. The woman's eyes dropped to the gun. You planning to shoot me or invite me in? Martha lowered the weapon. Mrs. Henderson, Jacob mentioned you. I'm sure he did. Ruth dismounted with a grunt, tied her mule to the porch rail. He also mentioned you might need some company while he's gone. Said you'd be too stubborn to admit it, but you'd be grateful anyway. Something loosened in Martha's chest. He said that. Words to that effect. Ruth climbed the porch steps, her boots heavy on the wood. You got coffee? Martha stepped aside. I'll make some. Ruth Henderson was not a woman who believed in silence. Within an hour, Martha knew more about her neighbors than she'd learned in weeks. The Hendersons had a ranch 10 miles east, 3 grown sons, and a daughter who'd married a banker in Denver and never wrote. The Crawfords were good people, but kept to themselves since their youngest died of fever last winter. The Millers, the family the town was named for, had moved away years ago, but their name stuck because nobody could agree on a new one. And Jacob, Ruth said, settling into a chair by the stove. You know about Jacob. Martha poured coffee into 2 cups. I know his wife died. Sarah, sweet girl. Too sweet for this land, maybe. Ruth took the cup Martha offered. She was pregnant when she passed. Baby came early, didn't survive. Jacob buried them both in the same grave. Martha sat down across from her. He told me. Some of it. Did he tell you what he did after? He said someone stopped him. A preacher. Ruth nodded. My husband. Frank used to ride circuit before his knees gave out. He found Jacob 3 days after the funeral sitting in this very cabin with a loaded gun. She paused. Frank stayed with him for a week. Wouldn't leave. Finally, Jacob put the gun away and started eating again. Martha looked around the cabin, seeing it differently now. The worn floorboards, the faded curtains, the chair Jacob always sat in positioned so he could see both the door and the window. He never talked about it, Ruth continued. Not once in 8 years. Just kept going, kept working, kept surviving. But he wasn't living. Not really. She met Martha's eyes. Until you. I didn't do anything. You gave him something to protect, something to fight for. Ruth set down her cup. That man would ride through hellfire for you and your children. I saw it in his face when he talked about you. He's got purpose again. Martha didn't know what to say. The words felt too big, too heavy, too dangerous to hold. I'm not looking for... I know what you're not looking for. Ruth's voice softened. And I know what you're scared of. But sometimes the things we're not looking for are exactly what we need. Before Martha could respond, the door burst open. Emma stood there, face pale, eyes wide. Mama! Men on the road. A lot of them. Martha grabbed the gun and ran to the window. 4 riders. No 5. Coming fast, kicking up mud and snow. And in front, on a black horse, wearing that too fine coat and those 2 clean gloves, Hector Dunn. Get the children in the back room, Martha said. Now. Ruth was already moving, grabbing Emma's arm, calling for Samuel. Martha heard footsteps, heard doors slamming, heard the scrape of furniture being moved. She stepped onto the porch. The riders stopped 20 yards out. Dunn dismounted first, that cold smile already on his face. Mrs. Hollis, lovely to see you again. I wish I could say the same. Dunn chuckled. Still got that fire. I like that. He glanced around the property. Mercer's not here, is he? Heard he rode out yesterday. Left you all alone. Martha's grip tightened on the gun. I ain't alone. Ah, yes. The Henderson woman. I saw her mule. Dunn waved a dismissive hand. 1 old woman and a widow with a pistol. Not exactly intimidating. Then why'd you bring 5 men? Dunn's smile flickered. Insurance. I'm a careful man, Mrs. Hollis. I don't like surprises. What do you want? You know what I want. What I've always wanted. He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded paper. I have a court order, signed by Judge Harrison. You have debts owed to the Hargrove Mining Company. Until those debts are paid, your children are to be remanded to company custody as collateral. Martha felt the world tilt. You can't take my children. The law says I can. The law doesn't know what you do to those children. The conditions. The hours. The law doesn't care, Mrs. Hollis. That's the beautiful thing about it. Dunn stepped closer. Now we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way, you hand over the children, sign some papers, and maybe you can work off the debt in a few years. The hard way. He glanced at his men. Well, let's just say I'd rather not make this unpleasant. Martha raised the gun. That's close enough. Dunn stopped. His smile didn't waver, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Mrs. Hollis, put down the gun. Get off this property. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was thinking I could run far enough to escape men like you. Martha's voice was steady, steadier than she felt. But I'm done running. This is my home now. These are my children, and you ain't taking either one. One of Dunn's men reached for his weapon. Martha swung the gun toward him. Don't. The man froze. I know how to use this. Martha said. My husband taught me before he died in one of your company's mines. You remember him, Thomas Hollis? The man whose body you left buried under rubble for 3 days before you bothered to dig him out. Dunn's expression didn't change. I don't know every worker who... You knew him. You knew all of them. And you didn't care. Just like you don't care about my children. They're not people to you. They're assets. Collateral. Numbers on a ledger. Mrs. Hollis. I said get off this property. The silence stretched tight as a bowstring. Martha felt sweat drip down her spine despite the cold. Her arms ached from holding the gun steady. Then Dunn laughed. You've got spine. I'll give you that. He folded the paper and tucked it back into his coat. But spine ain't gonna save you. I'll be back, Mrs. Hollis, with more men, with the law on my side, and when I do... He mounted his horse, looked down at her with that cold, empty smile. When I do that, gun ain't gonna be enough. He turned his horse and rode off. His men followed, casting dark looks over their shoulders. Martha stood on the porch until they disappeared. Then her legs gave out. She sat down hard on the steps, the gun falling from her trembling hands, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The fear she'd held back came flooding in, all of it, every drop, and she couldn't stop shaking. Ruth found her there, still shaking, still gasping. They're gone. Martha nodded. The children. Safe. Emma's with them. Ruth sat down beside her. You did good. Real good. He's coming back, with more men. I know. We can't fight them. Not alone. Ruth put a hand on her shoulder. Then it's a good thing you ain't alone. Jacob returned 2 days later, but he wasn't alone. Martha heard them before she saw them, hoofbeats, multiple horses, wagon wheels creaking. She grabbed the gun and ran to the window, heart pounding. Then she saw Jacob at the front of the group, and her knees nearly buckled with relief. He rode into the yard, flanked by nearly a dozen men. Behind them came 2 wagons loaded with supplies and what looked like weapons. Men of all ages, weathered and hard, the kind of men who'd carved lives out of unforgiving land. Martha stepped onto the porch. Jacob dismounted and crossed to her in 3 long strides. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at her with something fierce in his eyes. You're all right. Dunn came 2 days ago. Jacob's jaw tightened. How many men? 5. Did they hurt you, the children? No, I held them off. Martha's voice wavered. But he's coming back, he said. I know what he said. Jacob climbed the steps, stopped in front of her. Close enough to touch, but not touching. And I know what we're gonna do about it. He turned to the men behind him. This is Martha Hollis and her children. Hector Dunn and the Hargrove Mining Company want to take them. They've got papers, a crooked judge, and more men than we have. He paused. But they ain't got what we have. One of the men, older, gray-bearded, built like a barrel, stepped forward. And what's that? Home, Jacob said. This is our land, our territory. We didn't spend 20 years building lives out here just to let some mining company waltz in and take whatever they want. They've done it before, taken land, taken lives, taken everything from folks who couldn't fight back. His voice hardened. We can fight back. Another man spoke up. My brother worked for Hargrove. Died in a tunnel collapse. They never paid his widow a cent. My cousin, too, said another. 14 years old. They told his mama it was an accident. It wasn't an accident, Martha said. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. Every head turned toward her. Thomas, my husband, he told me what it was like down there. Rotting timbers they wouldn't replace. Air so thick you couldn't breathe. Boys young as 12 working shifts no grown man could survive. She stepped forward, her chin high. They don't care who dies. They just care about what they can take. And I won't let them take my children. Silence. Then the gray-bearded man nodded. I'm Frank Henderson. Jacob saved my cattle from rustlers 3 years back. I owed him. He looked at Martha. Now I reckon I owe you too. Anyone who stands up to those mining bastards has got my respect." One by one, the other men stepped forward. Names and handshakes. Stories of loss and survival. Men who'd watched the mining companies destroy their neighbors, their families, their friends. Men who'd been waiting for a reason to fight back. By the time the sun set, Mercer Ranch had become a fortress. The men set up camps around the property, positioned at strategic points Jacob marked out. Wagons were arranged to create barriers. Weapons were cleaned, ammunition counted, watches established. Martha moved through it all in a daze. She'd expected to feel safer with so many people around. Instead, she felt the weight of what was coming pressing down on her like a physical thing. That night, after the children were asleep and the camps had gone quiet, she found Jacob standing by the fence, staring out at the dark fields. She stood beside him without speaking. "You should get some rest," he said. "So should you." "I will. Later." They stood in silence for a while. Then Martha asked the question that had been burning in her chest all day. "What if we lose?" Jacob didn't answer right away. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "Then we lose. But we lose fighting. We lose standing up for something. We lose protecting what matters." He turned to look at her. "That's better than running. Better than letting them win without a fight. And if they kill you, kill these men who came to help, then at least we died for something." Martha's eyes stung. "That's not good enough." "It has to be." "No." She grabbed his arm, forced him to face her fully. "No, it doesn't. I didn't come all this way, survive all this, just to watch you die being noble. I need you alive, Jacob. The children need you alive." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of something he hadn't let himself see. "Martha." "Don't Martha me. I know what I'm saying. I know what it means." She stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him despite the cold. "I spent 18 months grieving a man who never came home. I can't do that again. I won't." Jacob's hand came up, cupped her face. His palm was rough against her cheek. "I'm not planning to die," he said softly. "Plans don't mean much when bullets start flying." "No, they don't." He leaned his forehead against hers. "But I made you a promise. I said I'd come back. And I keep my promises." "Then promise me again, right now. Promise me you'll survive whatever's coming." He was silent for a long moment. She could feel his breath on her face, feel his heartbeat through his coat where her hand pressed against his chest. "I promise," he said finally. "I'll survive. For you. For the children. For whatever comes after." Martha closed her eyes. That's all I needed to hear. They stood there, foreheads touching, hands intertwined, until the cold finally drove them inside. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Martha felt something like peace. It didn't last. 3 days later, a rider came from town with news that made Martha's blood run cold. Dunn wasn't just coming back with more men. He was coming with the law, a U.S. Marshal, and a dozen deputies armed with federal warrants and enough firepower to level the ranch. "They're calling it a debt collection," the rider, a young man named Peter, who worked at the general store, said. "But everyone knows what it really is. Dunn paid off someone high up. They're treating you like criminals." Jacob's face had gone to stone. "When?" "Tomorrow. Maybe the day after. They're gathering in Miller's Crossing now." Martha felt the world spin. She reached for the table, steadied herself. "A federal marshal," she whispered. "We can't fight the federal government." "We ain't fighting the government," Jacob said. "We're fighting corruption wearing a badge. There's no difference when you're the one getting shot at." Frank Henderson stepped forward. "The boy's right about one thing. If it's federal, that changes things. Some of these men, they got families. They can't risk." "I ain't asking anyone to die for me," Martha said. The words came out sharp, desperate. "I never asked for any of this. If you need to leave, leave. I won't hold it against you." The room went quiet. Then from the doorway a voice. "Mama." Martha turned. Emma stood there, Samuel's hand gripping hers. They must have heard everything. "Emma, go back to your room." "No." Emma stepped forward, her small face set with determination. "I want to help." "There's nothing you can do, sweetheart. This is grown up." "I can tell them." Emma's voice rose. "I can tell them what the mining company does, what they did to Papa, what they wanted to do to us." "Emma, you said I was smart, Mama. You said I knew how to write. Well, I've been writing. Every night since we got here." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "Everything I remember. Everything Papa told me. Everything those men said when they came to take our farm." Martha stared at her daughter. "What?" "Mr. Jacob said the ledgers needed fixing, so I fixed them. But I wrote other things. Things I thought someone should know." Emma held out the paper. "Maybe if people knew the truth they'd help us, really help us." Jacob took the paper unfolded. It began to read. His expression changed as his eyes moved down the page. Surprise, then anger, then something like hope. "Frank," he said quietly, "come look at this." Frank Henderson crossed the room, took the paper, read it for himself. His weathered face went through the same transformations Jacob's had. "Good God," he muttered. If this is true, it's true," Emma said firmly. "Papa told me. He made me promise to remember, in case anything ever happened." "In case what happened?" Emma met Martha's eyes. "In case they killed him, like they killed the others." The room went completely still. "Emma," Martha breathed. "What are you saying?" "Papa knew too much, about the tunnels, about why they collapsed. He found papers records that showed they knew the supports were failing and didn't fix them because it cost too much." Emma's voice trembled, but didn't break. "He was going to tell someone, a reporter in Denver. But then the tunnel collapsed and he—" She stopped, swallowed. "He never got the chance." Martha felt like she'd been punched in the chest. "He never told me. He didn't want you to worry. He said he'd handle it." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "But he didn't handle it, Mama. They killed him, and they're going to keep killing people unless someone stops them." Jacob knelt in front of Emma, put his hands on her shoulders. "This paper," he said gently. "Do you have more details? Names, dates, anything your father told you?" Emma nodded. "It's all in the ledger, the one I've been working on. I wrote everything I could remember in the margins in code so no one would see." "Can you show me?" "Yes." Jacob stood, looked at Martha. Something had changed in his eyes, not hope exactly, but determination, purpose. "This changes everything," he said. Martha shook her head. "It doesn't matter what we know if they kill us before we can tell anyone. It matters if we get word out first." Jacob turned to Peter. "That reporter in Denver, the one Emma's father was going to contact. Do you know his name?" I don't." "I do," Emma said. "Charles Bennett. Papa said he was the only honest journalist west of the Mississippi." Jacob looked at Frank. "How fast can your fastest rider get to Denver?" "Day and a half. Maybe less if he pushes hard." "Then we send word tonight. Everything Emma wrote. Everything we know." Jacob's voice hardened. "If Dunn wants a fight, we'll give him one. But while he's focused on us, the truth goes to Denver. And once it's out, all the marshals and badges in the world won't save the Hargrove Mining Company." Martha stared at him. "You really think this will work?" "I think it's our best chance." He crossed to her, took her hands. "Your daughter just gave us a weapon, the truth. It's stronger than guns, stronger than badges, stronger than anything Dunn can throw at us. And if we're all dead by the time the truth comes out—" Jacob squeezed her hands. "Then at least we die knowing we brought them down with us." It wasn't the answer Martha wanted, but it was the only one they had. That night, the fastest rider left for Denver, carrying Emma's writings and a letter Jacob had dictated explaining everything. The rest of them prepared for what was coming. Martha held her children close and prayed for the first time in months that someone up there was listening. The next morning came too fast. Martha hadn't slept. She'd spent the night sitting by her children's beds, watching them breathe, memorizing the curve of Emma's cheek and the way Samuel's hand curled under his chin when he dreamed. If this was the last time she'd see them peaceful, she wanted to remember every detail. Jacob found her there just before dawn. "They're coming," he said quietly. "Frank's lookout spotted them on the ridge, maybe an hour out." Martha nodded. She'd known this moment was coming, had braced for it all night. But hearing the words made it real in a way she wasn't ready for. "How many?" "Dunn's got about 15 men. The marshal brought another 10, plus deputies." Jacob paused. "More than we expected." Martha stood her legs stiff from sitting so long. "And us to 12, plus you, Ruth, and Mrs. Crawford." He didn't say what they both knew, that it wasn't enough, that it might never have been enough. "The children. Ruth's taking them to the root cellar. It's deep reinforced, safest place on the property." Martha looked at her sleeping children. Samuel had shifted in his sleep, one arm thrown over Emma's shoulder. They looked so small, so vulnerable. "I want to stay with them." "I know you do. But I can't. Can I?" Jacob didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew she couldn't hide in a cellar while others fought for her family. It wasn't who she was. Martha knelt beside the bed and gently shook Emma's shoulder. "Wake up, sweetheart. We need to move." Emma's eyes fluttered open, then went wide with understanding. "They're here. Almost. Ruth's going to take you and Samuel somewhere safe." "But I want to—" "No." Martha's voice came out sharper than she intended. She softened it, cupped her daughter's face. "Emma, listen to me. You've already done more than anyone could ask. You gave us a chance. Now I need you to do one more thing." "What?" "Survive. Take care of your brother. Whatever happens up here, whatever you hear, you stay hidden until someone comes for you. Promise me." Emma's lip trembled. "Mama, promise me." A long pause. Then in a voice so small it nearly broke Martha's heart. "I promise." Martha pulled her close, held her tight, breathed in the smell of her hair. Then she turned to Samuel, who was awake now, watching with frightened eyes. "Hey, little man, I need you to be brave today." "I'm scared." "I know. Me too." Martha kissed his forehead. "But brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway." "Like you." Martha felt tears prick her eyes. "Just like me. Now go with Ruth. Stay quiet. Stay hidden." Ruth appeared in the doorway, her face grim but steady. "Time to go." Martha watched as Ruth led her children out of the room. At the last moment, Samuel broke away and ran back, throwing his arms around her waist. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, baby. More than anything in this world." Then he was gone, and the room was empty, and Martha was left with nothing but the cold weight of the gun in her hand and the fear she refused to let show. Jacob was waiting on the porch when she stepped outside. The ranchers had taken positions around the property behind wagons in the barn along the fence line. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but their faces held a determination that went beyond numbers. These were men who'd built lives from nothing, who'd survived droughts and blizzards and everything the land could throw at them. They weren't going to back down now. Frank Henderson approached, rifle in hand. "They're at the bottom of the ridge. Looks like they're getting organized." "How long?" 10 minutes, maybe less." Jacob nodded. He turned to Martha, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly. "You could go with the children. No one would blame you." "Would you?" "No." "Then I'm staying." Something flickered in his eyes. Pride maybe, or fear for her, or something else entirely. He reached out and took her hand, squeezed it once. Whatever happens, don't. Martha cut him off. Don't say goodbye. Don't say anything that sounds like goodbye. We're going to survive this. You promised me. Jacob held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. I did, and I keep my promises. The riders appeared over the ridge like a dark wave rolling across the land. Dunn led them, that cold smile already fixed on his face. Beside him rode a man Martha didn't recognize, older, gray-haired, with a tin star pinned to his coat. The marshal. Behind them came the others, spread out in a loose formation, hands resting on weapons. They stopped 50 yards from the property line. Dunn dismounted first, making a show of adjusting his gloves, brushing dust from his coat. The marshal followed his movements, slower, more deliberate. Jacob stepped forward to meet them, positioning himself between the riders and the cabin. Martha moved to stand beside him. She felt the eyes of the other ranchers on her back, watching, waiting ready. Mr. Mercer. Dunn's voice carried across the distance. I warned you I'd be back. And I warned you what would happen if you set foot on my property again. But it's not just me this time. Dunn gestured to the marshal. This is U.S. Marshal William Hayes. He's here to ensure the lawful execution of a federal warrant. The marshal stepped forward. His face was weathered, lined with years of hard living. His eyes swept over the assembled ranchers with something that might have been weariness. I don't want trouble, Hayes said. His voice was deep, gravelly. I'm here to serve a warrant for the collection of debts owed to the Hargrove Mining Company. Mrs. Martha Hollis is to surrender her children as collateral until such debts are paid in full. With respect, Marshal, Jacob replied. That warrant ain't worth the paper it's printed on. It's got a judge's signature. A judge who's bought and paid for by the same company that's trying to steal from a widow and her children. Hayes's expression didn't change. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime, and Dunn here knows all about it. Jacob's voice hardened. Ask him about the tunnel collapses, about the safety reports that got buried, about the men and boys who died because fixing the supports cost more than their lives were worth. Dunn's smile faltered, just for a moment, but Martha saw it. This is ridiculous, Dunn said. Marshal, this man is obstructing federal law enforcement. I suggest you let the marshal do his job. Jacob didn't look away from Hayes. You're a lawman, a real one from what I hear. You didn't take this job to help mining companies steal children from their mothers. Hayes was silent for a long moment. His eyes moved from Jacob to Martha, lingering there. Ma'am, he said finally. You're Martha Hollis. I am. And those children, they're yours. They're mine. And I'd die before I let anyone take them. Something shifted in Hayes's face. Martha couldn't tell if it was respect or resignation or something else entirely. The warrant's legal, he said slowly. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not in my line of work. Hayes turned back to Jacob. I'm giving you one chance to stand down. Let us take the woman and children peacefully, and no one gets hurt. And if we don't... Hayes's hand moved to his gun. Behind him, 25 men did the same. Then I do my job. The silence stretched tight as a bowstring. Martha felt her heart pounding against her ribs. Her hand trembled around the gun in her pocket. She thought of her children hiding in the cellar. She thought of Thomas buried in a grave she'd never see again. She thought of all the running, all the fear, all the nights she'd spent wondering if she'd made the right choice. Then she thought of Jacob, of the life he'd offered her, of the home she was just beginning to believe in. She stepped forward. Marshal Hayes. Every eye turned to her. You say you're here to execute a legal warrant, but what if that warrant was obtained through fraud? What if the company that's claiming I owe them money actually owes me, owes all of us? Dunn laughed. This is absurd. Marshal, you don't have to listen to, let her speak. Hayes's voice was sharp. He looked at Martha. What are you talking about? My husband was Thomas Hollis. He worked for the Hargrove Mining Company for 6 years. He died in a tunnel collapse 18 months ago. Martha's voice was steady, even though her heart was racing. Before he died, he found evidence. Records that proved the company knew the tunnels were unsafe, that they'd been warned about failing supports, and did nothing because repairs would cut into their profits. "She's lying," Dunn said quickly. Too quickly. "I'm not lying. My daughter has the records. Everything Thomas found. Names, dates, documents, all of it. Right now, a writer is on his way to Denver with copies for Charles Bennett at the Rocky Mountain Herald." Dunn's face went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" "Your men came to my house in Colorado to collect a debt. But that wasn't the real reason, was it? You came because you knew Thomas had found something. You were afraid he'd told me, afraid I had proof." Martha stepped closer, her fear burning away in the heat of her anger. "Well, I do have proof. And by tomorrow, so will every newspaper in the territory." Hayes looked from Martha to Dunn. Something had changed in his expression, doubt maybe, or the first stirrings of suspicion. "Is this true?" he asked Dunn. "Of course not. She's a desperate woman, making desperate accusations." "Then you won't mind if I see these records?" "Marshall, we don't have time for—" "Make time." Hayes's voice had gone cold. "You told me this was a simple debt collection. Now I'm hearing about tunnel collapses and buried evidence. That changes things." "It doesn't change anything. The warrant is legal. The debt is real. Whatever fantasies this woman has concocted." "Then prove it." Martha cut him off. "If my husband's debt was real, you'll have records, loan documents, signatures, something besides a piece of paper from a crooked judge." Dunn's jaw tightened. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "No. But you have to prove it to him." Martha looked at Hayes. "Marshall, I'm not asking you to let us go. I'm asking you to wait. One day, that's all. Let the writer reach Denver. Let the truth come out. If I'm lying, you can take me and my children and do whatever you want. But if I'm telling the truth—" She paused. "If I'm telling the truth, then you're about to help a company that murdered my husband and dozens of others steal my children. Is that the kind of lawman you want to be?" Hayes was silent for a long moment. Then Dunn reached for his gun. Everything happened at once. Jacob moved faster than Martha would have believed possible, shoving her aside as Dunn's shot rang out. She hit the ground hard, tasted dirt, heard the crack of gunfire exploding all around her. Men were shouting. Horses screamed. Bullets tore through wood and flesh. Martha scrambled behind a wagon wheel, her gun in her hand, her mind racing. She peered around the edge and saw chaos. Dunn's men spreading out the ranchers returning fire. Jacob taking cover behind a water trough. And Hayes. Hayes standing in the middle of it all, his gun drawn, but not firing, looking around like a man who'd just woken up in the middle of a nightmare. "Cease fire!" he bellowed. "God damn it, cease fire!" No one listened. The shooting continued, hot lead whipping through the air, men falling on both sides. Martha saw Frank Henderson go down, clutching his shoulder. She saw one of Dunn's men stumble backward, a red flower blooming on his chest. She saw Jacob rise up and Fire saw another man fall. Then she saw Dunn. He was circling around the side of the cabin, away from the main fight. Moving toward the back of the property, toward the root cellar. The children. Martha didn't think. She ran. Her legs burned as she sprinted across the yard, bullets kicking up dirt around her feet. She heard someone shout her name, Jacob maybe, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Dunn had a head start, but Martha knew this land now, knew the shortcuts, the obstacles, the fastest path to the cellar. She pushed harder, her lungs screaming, her heart pounding. She caught up to him just as he reached the cellar door. "Stop!" Dunn spun, gun raised. His smile was gone, replaced by something wild and desperate. "Mrs. Hollis, still fighting. I admire that. Get away from that door. Or what, you'll shoot me." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're a mother, not a killer. Try me. They stood there, guns pointed at each other, the sounds of battle raging behind them. "You've ruined everything," Dunn said. His voice had changed raw, now ugly. "Months of planning, bribes, arrangements, all of it destroyed by a widow and her brats. My husband ruined it, when he found out what you were doing. Your husband was a fool. He should have kept his mouth shut and taken the money like everyone else." He wasn't like everyone else. No. And look where it got him. Dunn's grip tightened on his gun. But that's ancient history. Right now, all that matters is what's behind that door. If I can't have the company's money, I'll at least have something to bargain with. Martha's blood went cold. "You'd use children as hostages." "I'd use anything. That's how I survive." "Not today." She pulled the trigger. The shot went wide. Her hands were shaking too hard, but it was enough. Dunn flinched, dove to the side, his own shot going wild. Martha fired again, and this time she felt the gun kick against her palm, saw Dunn stumble. He wasn't down, but he was hurt, clutching his arm, blood seeping through his fingers. "You shot me," he said, like he couldn't believe it. "I warned you." Dunn raised his gun, his face twisted with rage. "You stupid—" A shot cracked from behind Martha. Dunn's head snapped back, and he crumpled to the ground still. Martha spun. Jacob stood 20 feet away, his rifle still raised, smoke curling from the barrel. His face was pale. His shirt was dark with blood, his own or someone else's, she couldn't tell, but his eyes were fixed on Dunn's body. "Is he—" "He's dead." Jacob lowered the rifle. "It's over." Martha's legs gave out. She sank to the ground, the gun falling from her nerveless fingers. The cellar door was right there, solid and silent. Her children were just a few feet away, safe alive. She started to cry. Jacob crossed to her, knelt beside her, pulled her against his chest. She clung to him, sobbing, her whole body shaking with relief and terror, and something she couldn't name. "It's over," he said again, his voice rough. "You're safe. The children are safe." "I thought—" "I know, but it's over now." They stayed like that until the gunfire stopped, until the shouts faded, until the only sound was Martha's ragged breathing and the beating of Jacob's heart against her ear. The aftermath was chaos. When Martha finally pulled herself together enough to open the cellar door, she found Ruth standing guard at the bottom of the steps, a shotgun in her hands, and murder in her eyes. "Is it done?" "It's done." Ruth lowered the gun. Behind her, two small faces peered out from the darkness. "Mama!" Samuel launched himself up the steps and into Martha's arms. She caught him, held him so tight she could feel his bones. Emma followed more slowly, her face pale and streaked with tears. "I heard shooting," Emma whispered. "I thought—" "I'm here. I'm right here." They clung to each other, all three of them, a tangle of arms and tears and whispered reassurances. Martha didn't let go, couldn't let go. If she let go, she might fall apart completely. Jacob gave them space. He dealt with the aftermath, the wounded, the dead, the questions that would need answering. Marshal Hayes had survived the firefight and was now standing over Dunn's body, his expression unreadable. "He drew on me first," Jacob said, approaching him. "On Mrs. Hollis. You saw it." Hayes nodded slowly. "I saw a lot of things today that don't sit right with me. The warrant. The warrant's worthless." Hayes looked up. "Even if I wanted to enforce it, I don't have the men anymore. Half my deputies are dead or wounded. The rest are—" He shook his head. "This wasn't what they signed up for." "So what happens now?" "Now I go back to Denver and write a very long report." Hayes's eyes moved to Martha, who was still holding her children, watching them from across the yard. "And I suggest you keep that rider moving. Whatever evidence that woman has, it needs to reach the right people. People who can do something about it." "You believe her?" Hayes was quiet for a moment. "I believe that a mother with 2 children doesn't stand in front of 25 armed men unless she's got nothing left to lose. And I believe that Dunn's reaction when she mentioned those records wasn't the reaction of an innocent man." He paused. That's not proof, but it's enough to make me ask questions. Jacob nodded. Thank you. Don't thank me. I just got a lot of men killed for something I should have questioned from the start. Hayes turned away. Get your people patched up, bury the dead, and stay out of trouble. He walked away barking orders at what remained of his men. Jacob stood there for a long moment watching him go. Then he turned and walked toward Martha. She looked up as he approached. Her eyes were red, her face streaked with dirt and tears, her hands still shaking. But when she saw him, something in her expression softened. How bad is it? She asked. We lost 3. The Henderson's boy and 2 of the Crawford hands. Dunn's side lost more. Martha closed her eyes. 3 men dead. Because of me. Because of Dunn. Because of the mining company. Not because of you. They came here to protect us. They came here to fight for what's right. Jacob knelt in front of her. Every man here knew the risk. They chose to stand anyway. That's not your fault. That's their courage. Martha opened her eyes. Samuel had fallen asleep against her chest, exhausted by fear and relief. Emma sat beside her, quiet but watching. What happens now? Martha asked. Now we wait. For the rider to reach Denver. For the truth to come out. Jacob reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her face. And then we build something. Together. If you'll let me. Martha looked at him. This man who'd pulled her from the snow, who'd sheltered her children, who'd stood between her and everything that wanted to destroy her. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Any of this. Staying in one place, trusting someone, building a life instead of running from one. I don't know either, but I'd like to figure it out. With you. Emma stirred beside her. Mama. Yes, sweetheart. Emma looked at Jacob, then back at her mother. He kept his promise. He survived. Martha felt the tears coming again. Yes, he did. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then slowly she reached out and took Jacob's hand. Thank you, she said quietly, for saving us. Jacob looked at the girl, this fierce, wounded child, who'd been ready to hate him, who'd carried her father's secrets like a burden too heavy for her small shoulders. You saved yourselves, he said. I just helped. Emma shook her head. Papa would have liked you, I think. Yeah, he always said the best men were the ones who didn't talk about how good they were. She paused. You don't talk much. Jacob almost smiled. No, I don't. Good, keep it that way. This time Martha did laugh. A broken, exhausted sound, but real. She pulled Emma close, pressed a kiss to her hair. Come on, Jacob said, standing. Let's get you all inside. It's going to be a long night. Martha let him help her up. Samuel stirred, but didn't wake his small body limp with exhaustion. She carried him toward the cabin, Emma walking beside her, Jacob behind them. The yard was full of people, wounded men being tended, bodies being covered, horses being calmed. But as Martha walked past, she saw something she hadn't expected. People were looking at her, not with judgment or suspicion, but with something else. Respect, maybe, or recognition. These ranchers and their wives. These people who'd risked everything to protect her family. They nodded as she passed, tipped their hats, murmured words she couldn't quite hear. Mrs. Pruitt appeared from somewhere, her gray hair escaping its bun, her face smudged with smoke. She fell into step beside Martha. You did good today, she said gruffly. I didn't do anything. You stood. When everything was falling apart, you stood. Mrs. Pruitt's voice softened. That's not nothing. That's everything. Martha didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. Inside the cabin, she laid Samuel on the bed and covered him with a quilt. Emma curled up beside him, her eyes already closing. Stay, Emma murmured. Please. I'm not going anywhere. Martha sat on the edge of the bed, her hand resting on her daughter's back. The sounds of the aftermath drifted through the walls. Voices, footsteps, the creak of wagons. But in this room, there was only quiet. Jacob appeared in the doorway. He'd washed the blood from his hands and changed his shirt, but exhaustion lined every feature. "Ruth's got food on the stove, when you're ready." "Thank you." He nodded, turned to go. "Jacob." He stopped. "Stay. Please." He looked at her, at the children, at the bed where his wife had died 8 years ago, where he'd thought he'd never feel anything again. Then he crossed the room and sat beside her, his shoulder touching hers. They didn't speak, didn't need to. Outside, the world was still burning. But in here, in this small room, there was something new, something that felt like the beginning of a different kind of life. The days after the battle passed in a blur of exhaustion and quiet miracles. Martha woke each morning expecting the nightmare to continue. More riders, more guns, more men coming to take what she'd fought to keep. But the road stayed empty. The only visitors were neighbors bringing food, offering help, asking if there was anything they could do. The dead were buried on the third day. The whole town came out for it. Mrs. Pruitt organized the service, her voice steady as she read from a worn Bible. The 3 men who'd fallen defending the ranch, young Tom Henderson and the Crawford brothers, were laid to rest on a hillside overlooking Jacob's land. Their families wept. Their friends stood silent. And Martha stood among them, her children pressed close, feeling the weight of their sacrifice like a stone in her chest. After the service, Tom's mother approached her. Martha braced herself for anger, for blame, for the accusation she'd been making against herself for days. But Mrs. Henderson just took her hands and held them. "He believed in something," she said quietly. "For the first time in his life, my boy believed in something worth fighting for." Her eyes were red but steady. "Don't you dare feel guilty for giving him that." Martha couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. That night she found Jacob standing at the fresh graves, his hat in his hands. She stood beside him without speaking. "I knew Tom when he was a baby," Jacob said finally. "Watched him take his first steps. Taught him to ride." His voice was rough. "Now I watched him die." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He made his choice." Jacob put his hat back on. "We all did." "Does it get easier? The guilt?" "No. But you learn to carry it." He turned to look at her. "You learn that honoring their sacrifice means living well, not just surviving living." Martha looked at the graves, at the simple wooden crosses, at the flowers someone had already placed there. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "I've been surviving so long, I forgot what living feels like." "Then we figure it out together." She reached for his hand. He let her take it. They stood there until the stars came out, 2 broken people holding on to each other in the dark. 2 weeks after the battle, the rider returned from Denver. Martha was in the kitchen when she heard the hoofbeats. Her hands went still over the bread she was kneading, her heart suddenly pounding. Jacob met the rider in the yard. Martha watched from the window, trying to read their expressions, trying to guess what news had traveled back from the city. When Jacob came inside, his face told her nothing. "Well," he set a bundle of newspapers on the table. The top one had a headline that made Martha's breath catch in her throat. "Hargrove Mining Company exposed documents reveal years of negligence cover-ups." She picked up the paper with trembling hands. The article filled the entire front page, names, dates, details she recognized from Emma's writings. Quotes from miners who'd survived, statements from officials promising investigations. "It worked," she whispered. It actually worked. "There's more." Jacob pulled out a letter from inside his coat. From Charles Bennett, the reporter. Martha took the letter, unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, professional. "Mrs. Hollis," she read aloud. The documents your daughter provided have proven invaluable. We have confirmed their authenticity and are prepared to publish a full series exposing the Hargrove Mining Company's practices. Several officials have already resigned, and a federal investigation is underway. Most importantly, the fraudulent debts claimed against you and other mining widows are being reviewed. You should receive official notice of debt forgiveness within the month. Your courage in coming forward has saved countless lives. The territory owes you a debt that can never be repaid. Martha's hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold the paper. It's over, she said. It's really over. Not quite. Jacob sat down across from her. There's something else in there. Keep reading. She scanned the letter, her eyes widening. He wants to interview me. In person. He's coming here. Next week. Says he wants to tell your story properly. Martha set the letter down. Her mind was racing fear and relief and something else all tangled together. I don't know if I can do that. Talk about Thomas. About everything that happened. You don't have to decide right now. But people should know what the company did, what Thomas tried to do. She looked at Jacob. What you and the others risked. That's not why we did it. I know, but it matters anyway. Jacob was quiet for a moment. Then he reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Whatever you decide, I'll be right there with you. Martha looked at their hands. His rough, weathered, scarred. Hers still trembling, but steadier than before. Why? She asked. Why are you still here? The danger's past. You don't owe me anything. I told you before. This ain't about owing. Then what is it about? Jacob met her eyes. For a long moment he said nothing. Then slowly, carefully, like a man choosing each word with deliberate care. The night Sarah died, I made myself a promise. I said I'd never love anything again. Never let anyone close enough to hurt me. He paused. I kept that promise for 8 years. And I was miserable. Empty. Just going through the motions of living without actually being alive. Jacob. Then you showed up. Half-dead, stubborn as hell, ready to fight the world with your bare hands if that's what it took to protect your children. Something shifted in his expression, softer, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen. And something inside me woke up. Something I thought was dead forever. Martha's throat tightened. I'm scared. I know. I've already lost one husband. I can't. I'm not asking you to marry me. Jacob's voice was gentle. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to figure this out. Together. Whatever that looks like. However long it takes. And if I can't, if I'm too broken, too scared, then we're broken and scared together. That's still better than being broken and scared alone. Martha stared at him. This man who'd saved her life, who'd stood between her and everything that wanted to destroy her, who'd never asked for anything in return except the chance to keep standing. I don't deserve you, she whispered. Probably not. A hint of a smile crossed his face. But I'm here anyway. She laughed, a broken, wet sound that turned into a sob halfway through. And then she was crying, and Jacob was pulling her close, and she let herself be held for the first time in longer than she could remember. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a promise of happily ever after. But it was a start. The reporter came the following week just as promised. Charles Bennett was younger than Martha expected, barely 30, with wire-rimmed glasses and a notebook that never seemed to leave his hand. He asked questions for 3 days straight, gentle but thorough, drawing out details Martha had tried to bury. She told him about Thomas, about the mine, about the night the men came with rifles and took everything, about the long walk through the snow, the children behind her like ghosts, the certainty that they wouldn't survive. She told him about Jacob, about the ranchers who'd stood with them, about the battle and the blood and the moment she'd pulled the trigger to protect her children. And she told him about Emma, about the brave, brilliant girl who'd carried her father's secrets and turned them into weapons. Bennett wrote it all down, every word. This story's going to change things, he said on the last day. Not just for you, for everyone. Miners' families across the territory are going to read this and realize they're not alone, that they can fight back. I didn't do it to start a movement. The best movements never start that way. They start with one person who refuses to give up. Bennett closed his notebook. You're that person, Mrs. Hollis, whether you wanted to be or not. After he left, Martha stood on the porch watching his wagon disappear down the road. Jacob came to stand beside her. You all right? I don't know. She wrapped her arms around herself. It feels strange, telling the story, making it real in a way it wasn't before. Sometimes that's how you let go, by giving it to someone else to carry. Martha looked at him. Is that what you did with Sarah? No. I carried it alone for 8 years. He paused. Don't recommend it. She almost smiled. I'll keep that in mind. Spring came slowly the way healing does. The snow melted, revealing green shoots pushing through the mud. The creek behind the cabin thawed and started its quiet whisper again. Birds returned, filling the mornings with songs that had been silent all winter. Martha found herself changing too. The fear that had lived in her chest for so long began to loosen its grip. She stopped watching the road every hour, stopped bracing for disaster every time she heard hoofbeats, started believing just a little that maybe the worst was behind them. Samuel flourished under Jacob's attention. The boy who'd barely spoken for months now chattered constantly, full of questions about horses and cattle and everything in between. He'd started calling Jacob Mr. Jake, his own invention, and Martha didn't have the heart to correct him. Emma was slower to thaw. She still held herself apart. Sometimes, still retreated into silence when the memories got too heavy. But she'd stopped fighting Jacob's presence, started seeking him out, even asking for help with the ledgers, or bringing him coffee when he worked late. One evening, Martha found them on the porch together, Emma reading aloud from one of Jacob's books while he whittled something small from a piece of wood. She stood in the doorway, watching her heart so full it hurt. You look like you're about to cry, Emma said without looking up. Maybe I am. You cry a lot these days. I know. Emma finally raised her eyes. Is that bad? No, sweetheart. It's just, I spent so long not letting myself feel anything. Now it's all coming out at once. Like a dam breaking. Something like that. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then carefully she asked, Are you happy, Mama? The question caught Martha off guard. She thought about it, really thought about it, not just the automatic response she would have given months ago. I think I'm learning to be, she said finally. It's been so long I almost forgot what happy felt like, but I'm remembering. Emma nodded slowly. Me too. That night, after the children were asleep, Martha and Jacob sat together by the fire. It had become a ritual, these quiet hours at the end of the day, just the two of them and the crackle of flames. Emma asked if I was happy, Martha said. What did you tell her? That I'm learning to be. She paused. It felt like the truth. Jacob set down the piece of wood he'd been working on. In the firelight, she could see what it was, a small horse carved with delicate precision. For Samuel, he said when he caught her looking. He's been asking. You're good with them. They're good kids. You raised them well. I nearly got them killed. You kept them alive. There's a difference. Jacob leaned back in his chair. Martha, you've got to stop punishing yourself for what happened. The choices you made, the risks you took, they were the right ones. The only ones. How do you know that? Because you're all still here, breathing, living, starting over. He turned to look at her. That's not failure. That's survival. Martha stared into the flames. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something else to go wrong, for this. She gestured around her at the cabin, the fire hymn. For this to be taken away. Maybe it will be. Maybe something will go wrong. That's life. It don't come with guarantees. Jacob's voice was steady. But you can't live waiting for the worst. You've got to choose to live anyway, in spite of the fear, in spite of the maybe. Is that what you're doing? I'm trying. He paused. It's easier with you. Martha looked at him. This man who'd been a stranger 3 months ago, who'd pulled her from the snow and asked nothing in return, who'd fought for her family like they were his own, who'd shown her day by day what it meant to choose life over just survival. I want to stay, she said. Here, with you. I want to stop running and build something. Then stay. It's not that simple. It can be, if you let it. Martha's eyes stung. I'm terrified. I know. I don't know how to love someone without being afraid of losing them. Neither do I. Jacob reached out and took her hand. But I'd rather love scared than not love at all. I spent 8 years in that emptiness. I'm not going back. Martha squeezed his hand, felt the roughness of his palm, the steadiness of his grip, the warmth that had become so familiar she couldn't imagine being without it. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Okay. I'll stay. I'll try. She laughed, shaky and wet. I'll love scared, I guess, if you'll have me. Jacob pulled her close, his arms wrapped around her solid and warm, and she let herself sink into him. I'll have you, he murmured against her hair. Every day, for as long as you'll let me. She stayed. Summer came golden and warm. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts, Jacob handling the cattle and horses, Martha managing the house and accounts, the children finding their places in between. Samuel grew taller and braver, losing the shadows that had haunted his young face. He'd started calling Jacob Pa tentatively at first, then with more confidence when no one corrected him. Jacob hadn't said anything, but Martha saw the way his eyes softened every time the word left Samuel's lips. Emma bloomed in her own quiet way. She'd taken over the garden, coaxing vegetables from stubborn soil with a patience that surprised everyone. She still wrote poems now, and stories, filling notebook after notebook with words she wouldn't let anyone read. But she smiled more, laughed more, started to believe maybe that the future could hold something besides fear. The story in the Rocky Mountain Herald had done its work. The Hargrove Mining Company was under investigation, its officials fleeing or facing charges. Mining widows across the territory were having their fraudulent debts forgiven, and Martha's name had become something she never expected, a symbol. A beacon for people who'd thought they had no power against the forces crushing them. Letters arrived from strangers telling their own stories, thanking her for speaking up. Martha answered every one, even when it took hours. Even when the memories they stirred up kept her awake at night. It felt important, like the least she could do to honor what others had sacrificed. On a warm evening in August, Jacob found her on the porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and red. Beautiful, she murmured. Yes, you are. She turned to find him watching her, not the sunset. Something had shifted in his expression. A nervousness she hadn't seen since the day they met. Jacob, what is it? He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. In the fading light, Martha couldn't quite see what it was until he held it up. A ring. Simple, plain, carved from wood so dark it was almost black. I made this, he said. Took me 3 weeks. I kept messing it up, starting over. Sarah used to say I had hands like a blacksmith's, good for heavy work, not so good for delicate things. He almost smiled. Turns out she was right, but I wanted it to be from me, not bought, not borrowed, just me. Martha's heart was pounding. Jacob, you don't have to say yes, you don't have to say anything. He took a breath. I love you, Martha. I've loved you since the day you pointed that gun at me and told me to stay away from your children. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you cry at stupid things now that you've let yourself feel again. They're not stupid. You cried at a baby chicken last week. It was fluffy. Jacob laughed, that rough, surprised sound she'd come to treasure. I love that you cried at a fluffy chicken. I love everything about you, and I want to spend whatever time I've got left showing you what that means. Martha looked at the ring, at his face, at this man who'd become her home without her even noticing. I'm not the same woman you pulled from the snow, she said quietly. I'm harder now, more scarred. So am I. I might wake up scared some days, might push you away, might need more patience than anyone should have to give. I've got patience, got nothing but time. Jacob, say yes or say no, but say something because I'm about to shake out of my boots over here. Martha laughed. It came out wet and broken, but real. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to whatever comes next. Jacob's face transformed relief and joy, and something so tender it made her chest ache. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. How did you know my size? Ruth helped. She's sneakier than she looks. Martha examined the ring, running her finger over the smooth wood. What kind of wood is this? Ironwood. It's strong, durable, lasts forever if you take care of it. He covered her hand with his. Like us. She kissed him then, not because she had to, not because she was scared or grateful or desperate, but because she wanted to, because she loved him, because after everything she'd lost and survived and fought for, she'd finally found something worth keeping. They were married in September, on the hillside where the three ranchers were buried. It wasn't traditional, but nothing about their story had been traditional, and Martha didn't see any reason to start now. The men who'd died defending her family deserved to be part of this moment, deserved to know that their sacrifice had led to something beautiful. The whole town came. Mrs. Pruitt, who'd organized everything with her usual efficiency. The Hendersons and Crawfords, still grieving but determined to celebrate. The ranchers who'd stood with them, their families, their friends. Even Marshall Hayes made the journey looking uncomfortable in a clean suit, but present nonetheless. Emma stood at Martha's side holding flowers she'd picked that morning. Samuel stood next to Jacob, practically vibrating with pride at being included. The preacher, the same one who'd saved Jacob's life 8 years ago, brought back for this occasion, kept the service simple. Do you, Jacob Mercer, take this woman to be your wife? To love and cherish in good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live. I do. And do you, Martha Hollis, take this man to be your husband, to love and cherish in good times and bad, for as long as you both shall live? Martha looked at Jacob. At this man who'd given her everything without asking for anything in return. Who'd taught her that love wasn't about possession or protection, but about standing beside someone and letting them stand beside you. I do. Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. Jacob kissed her, and the crowd cheered, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark sang. Martha Hollis died that day. Martha Mercer was born. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The years that followed weren't easy. Nothing worth having ever was. There were hard winters and dry summers. Cattle lost to disease and storms that tested the limits of their endurance. Martha lost 2 more babies before they were born. Grief that nearly broke her grief that Jacob carried with her until it became bearable. But there were good years too. Samuel grew into a young man his father would have been proud of, strong and kind and full of questions. He took over more and more of the ranch work as Jacob's joints grew stiff, proving himself capable in ways that surprised everyone except Martha. Emma left for Denver when she turned 18, chasing dreams of writing and journalism. She worked for Charles Bennett at the Rocky Mountain Herald, becoming one of the first female reporters in the territory. Her letters home were full of stories about corruption, exposed about injustices, fought about the power of truth to change the world. She came back for visits, always bringing Samuel books he devoured in days, and Martha fabrics from the city. And she brought something else too, news of the changes sweeping through the territory, mining companies facing accountability, widows and orphans protected by new laws, A world slowly, imperfectly becoming more just. "You started this," Emma told Martha during one visit. "You know that, right? Everything that's changed, it started with you. It started with your father, with his courage. I just carried it forward." "That's what courage is, Mama. Carrying things forward even when you're scared." Martha thought about that often in the years that followed. About Thomas who'd tried to do the right thing and paid with his life. About the ranchers who'd stood with them. About Jacob, who'd given her a reason to stop running and start building. She thought about fear too. How it had controlled her for so long. How it still crept in sometimes in quiet moments when the past felt too close. But she'd learned something important. Fear wasn't the opposite of courage. Fear was what made courage possible. You couldn't be brave if you weren't scared first. Jacob taught her that. Her children taught her that. The life they'd built together brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice taught her that. On the evening of her 20th wedding anniversary, Martha stood on the porch of the cabin that had become her home. The sun was setting, painting the hills in colors so beautiful it almost hurt to look at them. Jacob came to stand beside her, moving slower, now his hair gone gray. But his eyes were the same steady, warm, full of the quiet love that had anchored her for 2 decades. 20 years, she said. 20 years. You tired of me yet? He pretended to think about it. Ask me again in another 20. She laughed and leaned into him, feeling his arm settle around her shoulders. I've been thinking, she said. Dangerous. I've been thinking about the day we met. How I pointed a gun at you and told you to stay away. Best day of my life. You're crazy. Probably. He pressed a kiss to her hair. But I'm crazy about you, so it evens out. Martha smiled. 20 years, and he could still make her smile like a girl. Do you ever wonder what would have happened? She asked. If you hadn't found us on that road, if you'd just ridden past. I couldn't have ridden past. Something stopped me. I don't know what fate, God, dumb luck. But I looked at you and those children and I knew. I knew my life was about to change. For better or worse? Better, always better. He turned her to face him. Martha, you gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up in the morning. You gave me the same thing. Then I'd say we're even. She kissed him, soft, slow, full of all the words they didn't need to say anymore. When they pulled apart, Jacob nodded toward the road. 2 figures on horseback were approaching silhouettes against the fading light. Expecting company. Martha squinted. Then her face broke into a smile. It's Emma and Samuel. They came together for the anniversary, their children no longer children returning to the place where everything had begun. They brought stories and laughter and news from the wider world. They brought partners now, too. Samuel's young wife Emma's serious-eyed beau, who looked terrified of Jacob and tried not to show it. The cabin filled with noise and warmth and life. Later after dinner, after the stories and the toasts and the tears, Martha stepped outside for air. The night was cool and clear. Stars scattered across the sky like promises. Emma found her there. You okay, Mama? More than okay. Martha looked at her daughter, this fierce, brilliant woman who'd survived so much and turned it into something powerful. I'm proud of you. You know that. You tell me every time I visit. And I'll keep telling you until you believe it. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm writing a book. About us. About what happened. I know. I want people to remember, not just the facts, but the feelings. What it was like to be that scared, that desperate, and still keep going. Why? Because somewhere out there right now there's a woman who feels like we felt, who thinks she's alone, who thinks there's no way out. Emma's voice strengthened. I want her to read our story and know that's not true, that survival is possible, that there's always the chance for something better. Martha felt tears prick her eyes. Your father would be so proud of you. I know. But it's not just about him anymore. Emma took her mother's hand. It's about all of us. The ones who fought. The ones who died. The ones who survived. That's a lot to carry. It is. But you taught me how. Emma squeezed her hand. You taught me that the weight gets lighter when you share it, when you tell the truth, when you let people in. Martha pulled her daughter close, held her the way she had when Emma was small and scared, and the world was falling apart around them. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Mama. They stood there, mother and daughter, under a sky full of stars. And Martha thought about the road that had brought her here. The pain and the fear and the countless moments when giving up would have been easier than going on. She thought about Thomas buried in a grave she'd finally visited last year, about the children they'd lost, the battles they'd fought, the scars that would never fully heal. But she also thought about what they'd built. The family that had grown from 4 desperate survivors to this noise and warmth and love that filled every corner of the cabin behind her. The legacy that would carry forward in Emma's words, in Samuel's children, in the stories that would be told long after they were all gone. She thought about Jacob waiting inside, probably wondering if she'd gotten lost in her own thoughts again. Knowing her well enough to give her space, loving her enough to always be there when she came back. She thought about fear and courage, and the choice she'd made 20 years ago on a frozen road. The choice to live. Not just survive, live. Fully, completely, with all the joy and pain and uncertainty that came with it. She'd made that choice every day since, and she would keep making it tomorrow and the next day and every day that followed, because that was what it meant to be truly alive. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward anyway, to love anyway, to hope anyway. Martha Mercer looked up at the stars one last time. Then she turned and walked back into the light and warmth of her home, where her family waited, where her life waited, where everything she'd ever fought for had finally become real. She closed the door behind her, and she was home.